East Coast are coping with the devastating effects of Sandy. Back home, two scary situations today prompted evacuations in our region. Good evening, I'm Myrtle and Williams.
And I'm Kagan Harsha. A hazmat situation in Santa Teresa had almost 200 people seeking medical attention. Meanwhile, a big warehouse fire in central El Paso sent plumes of dark smoke into the sky and forced people to evacuate their place of work. Nearly 60 firefighters were called to that scene. News Channel 9's Kathy Hernandez joins us in our news center with more on today's massive blaze. Kathy?
Kagan, investigators say faulty wiring caused the building fire. I talked to a nearby business owner who says he's glad no one was hurt. Large flames could be seen shooting from the roof of this 6,000 square foot building on Myrtle near Williams Street.
We tried to make an interior attack, but the building is in very bad condition. The fire had grown very, very rapidly by the time we even got here.
Firefighters were forced to battle the blaze only from the outside, worried it might collapse. The building was being used as a storage facility for building supplies such as lumber, wood doors, and wood frames. Fortunately, no one was inside the building, but people nearby saw flames and got out as soon as they could.
And I went out through the front door, and sure enough, 2 doors down, there was like 10-foot flames coming out through the front window.
Steve Trawick owns Texas Saw and Sharpening.
Fire guys said, hey, you guys got to vacate the building. Shut everything down. I'm like, oh, but my cat's in here, my bike's in here, and said, no, just shut it all down, and you guys got to have to leave.
After the fire was out, Trawick found about 2 inches of water in his business. He says he's just glad everyone is okay.
Yeah, it's pretty sad, but, since the people next door, they got out okay and everything. Yeah, everything's sort of tragic, but, the important thing is everybody got out okay. Everybody's all right. Little time lost, but, come out in the end.
The building is a total loss. The city's building services department was also on the scene evaluating the building to determine when it will be demolished. Live in the news center, Kathy Hernandez, News Channel 9.
All right, thank you, Kathy. Well, emergency crews are in Santa Teresa tonight testing the air quality to find out what was making people sick in that area today. Employees at the Doña Ana County Industrial Park near the Santa Teresa port of entry reported a strong odor this morning. About 200 were treated for difficulty breathing, lightheadedness, nausea, and dizziness. Crews ordered a mandatory evacuation within a 1-mile radius of the industrial park.
The next order of business is to conduct some air quality tests within the perimeter to determine the nature of that substance. We're working diligently and hope that it doesn't take any longer than necessary.
Just before 4 this afternoon, the Doña Ana County Emergency Operations Center was deactivated. The Doña Ana County Airport at Santa Teresa remains closed to air traffic. The New Mexico National Guard is now helping with monitoring and testing. Now, earlier today, residents within the 2-mile radius of the park were told not to use their air conditioners and to close all of their doors and windows. That advisory has been lifted tonight. And many of those employees out at the industrial site started their mornings very early, and work was already in full swing when supervisors ordered them to evacuate the area. News Channel 9's Russ Pappas was on the scene where those employees were relocated, and he joins us now live in the data center. Russ?
Thank you. When emergency responders have to deal with a large scene or disaster, and especially one with many patients, a triage is set up off location. It's basically a small hospital zone far enough away from the initial problem where victims can be evaluated and treated. Today, a triage was set up at Santa Teresa High School. An emergency horn and flashing lights, that was the scene in the Santa Teresa High School parking lot this morning as hundreds of evacuees, employees who work at the industrial site just a mile up the road, were evaluated and treated for an unknown airborne chemical. According to some of the witnesses, it all started around 9 a.m. and mostly affected those who worked outside the buildings.
Oh, it didn't smell like anything. It kind of reminded me of carbon monoxide, so it was just a little itch. It kind of made you cough a little.
We still don't know exactly what was released into the air. Some of the victims described it as having a lemon-like odor. One actually said it smelled more like chilies. But everyone agreed it was an irritation, and they were all glad for the quick response time. No one was hospitalized or seriously injured. Now, just before 2 o'clock this afternoon, the triage site at the Santa Teresa High School was deactivated. The school itself was never in any harm, and classes were not disrupted. Live from the studio, Russ Pappas, News Channel 9.
All right, thanks, Russ. A special emergency response vehicle was used for the first time during that emergency this morning. It's an ambulance bus, and it was designed for incidents just like this one. This MPV, or multiple patient vehicles, the first of its kind, and it cost the state of Texas $500,000. If needed, it can provide high-level care required for the most critical patients.
It serves the border region. It's unique in that it goes into New Mexico. We service an area 220 miles out from El Paso, and so it covers really half the state of New Mexico and a large portion of West Texas. The nearest bus like this is Lubbock.
And the MPV can transport up to 30 people at a time, and 20 of those can be in serious condition. This morning, nearly 80 people were given a ride in that bus. Hurricane Sandy slammed into the Northeast Monday, causing a lot of widespread destruction.
And dozens of people lost their lives in the storm. NBC's Jay Gray is in the lower Manhattan with the very latest.
The day after, the devastation is overwhelming.
This is literally the storm of our lifetime.
Sandy battered the mid-Atlantic and East Coast, violent winds and raging floodwaters that turned deadly overnight. More than 24 people killed, and there's fear tonight that number could climb.
The enormity of the storm and the power of the storm, and then you have calls coming in, and you just can't get to these people. So we don't know if we have bodies out there right now or not. That's why we're out on the road now looking.
Sandy's rage began as it crossed the Jersey Shore, shattering windows, crumbling buildings, and tearing away boardwalks along the coast.
The level of devastation at the Jersey Shore is unthinkable.
This image of a roller coaster twisted and tossed into the water, a telling symbol of Sandy's wild ride. The floodwaters were so intense, cars and lives were in an instant turned upside down.
I thought the house was going to come off the foundation. Literally, I thought we were going to die.
That same fear and the force of the massive storm was felt all along the coast. More than 8 million homes lost power in more than a dozen states, and the early damage estimates are at $20 billion. Some of the worst was here in New York, the nation's largest city, crippled by high winds and a record storm surge. Water pouring into lower Manhattan, swallowing neighborhoods and washing out the subway system. Ironically, it was that water that prevented firefighters from dousing these flames in Queens. 80 homes were lost. And now, as the cleanup begins,
clearly the challenges our city faces in the coming days are enormous.
The mayor and millions in the strike zone.
It's really a catastrophe.
Understand that it will take a long time to recover from the damage Sandy left behind. Jay Gray.
That was Jay Gray reporting. Meanwhile, further inland, Hurricane Sandy became a full-blown blizzard. Snow fell in the mountains of West Virginia, and as far south as North Carolina, parts of Kentucky and Ohio also got pounded. But even further west, over Lake Michigan, Sandy mimicked what it did over the Atlantic, kicking up waves high enough to force evacuations. Widespread power outages were reported along Lake Erie and Cleveland because of those high winds. And coming up at 6, News Channel 9's Anusha Rasta shows us the economic impact Sandy's causing on much of the nation and with us. El Paso Electric is sending at least 3 crews to the East Coast to help restore power, but those crews won't leave now until Friday. The storm knocked out power to about 3 million homes. 17 El Paso Electric workers will head to Baltimore. A flatbed truck full of equipment will depart tomorrow.
The El Paso Red Cross is still on standby, waiting to be activated to help in the aftermath of Sandy. At any time, crews could be called upon to help storm victims, but in the meantime, the Red Cross says you can help those in need simply by making monetary donations online via their website. We've posted that information for you on our website, ktsm.com. And speaking of donations to Sandy victims, the Better Business Bureau is urging people to be careful of fraudulent charities and requests for donations that often emerge after a natural disaster strikes. 2 excellent websites offering guidance are www.whitehouse.gov and www.state.gov. You can also go to www.bbb.org/charity to verify whether or not the soliciting organization is accredited by the Better Business Bureau and meets the 20 standards for charity accountability. This information is also posted on our website, ktsm.com. Well, in terms of the weather, it was another quiet day here in the borderland. Here's how things look outside our KTSM studios in central El Paso. Another day with blue skies. Let's turn things over now to meteorologist Chuck DeBroder for our first look at our forecast. Chuck?
Well, we talked about high pressure and clear skies and also above average temperatures. That's exactly what happened today and the next few days. High temperature this afternoon. How about 77 in Tierra, Alamogordo, and Guadalupe Pass. 81 in Juarez. 48 the overnight low with a light wind. Now, coming up in just a bit, I have a forecast for your trick-or-treating and beyond. Late night Halloween forecast. If you go up to a house like this, it could be a little scary. We'll talk about it coming up.
All righty, thank you, Chuck. Well, tomorrow on News Channel 9 at 10, who will be our new face in Washington? I am looking at the pivotal race between Beto O'Rourke and Barbara Carrasco, which will mean new representation for us in D.C. They spoke to us about the issues most directly affecting us here in the borderland and how they hope to change things in Washington.
So there's a lot of work we need to do in Washington, and as a congresswoman, I'm going to go over there, and I just know I'm going to be a thorn in a lot of men's sides.
So proud to be a candidate in this race and asking for everyone's consideration and vote on Election Day, November 6th.
What you need to know before Election Day, it's Beto versus Barbara tomorrow on News Channel 9 at 10. Well, everyone, thank you for joining us here on News Channel 9 at 5.
And still ahead tonight, the unemployment rate remains high in El Paso, but thousands headed to a job fair downtown today, hoping to change that.
And tonight we'll introduce you to an El Paso man who's dedicated his life to do good for others. Chuck?
Well, too much rain on the East Coast. We do have a chance of a few showers in the borderland. I'll tell you when. Plus, take a look at your Halloween weather after the break.